When you live in a small town, nothing exciting ever really happens. Of course, the minute that something even remotely out of the usual takes place, everyone is all over whatever it might be. So far, for the last few days, the peculiar events that have been taking place involve the missing person reports on the evening news. People don't go missing here. At least, not for long. But for some reason, there's been a new missing person report every day for the last week and a half. I didn't notice this until my mom called me to gossip yesterday. According to her, Teresa's sister's brother-in-law had a friend whose kid was reported as missing on the news, even though he wasn't missing. Everyone figured it was just some kind of mistake, and the kid's parents called the police and the news station to let them know that the kid was fine, and everything worked out. That would have been the end of it, if it weren't for the fact that it happened again, and again, and again. Every single evening, without fail, Channel 18 would report a missing person who wasn't missing. Each evening after the report, the police and the news station would receive calls correcting their mistake. And the next evening, the same thing happened. By the end of the first week, people were more annoyed than anything else. Everyone figured that the news was simply trying to play some practical joke on people, and it was starting to get old. Sunday night, there was no missing person report. Monday morning, everyone who had been reported missing throughout the week was gone. Chaos ensued, as expected. Everyone blamed Channel 18, of course. They were the ones who made the reports before anything went wrong, and now, suddenly, 6 people had seemingly fallen off the face of the earth. One of these 6 people included the Sosa's 3-month-old daughter, Ruby. The Sosas had a nanny cam in the baby's room, but it was not of much help. Apparently, the footage glitched for a split second. The screen turned black, and then the baby was gone. Whoosh, vanished into thin air. Multiple search parties formed, but there were only so many places that someone could hide in this small town, and none of those places contained the missing people. By Monday evening, everyone was on edge, glued to their television screens, waiting to see who would be reported missing next. I decided to tune into the broadcast that evening, and so I sat in front of the TV with my daughter Zoe and my wife Roxanne, all 3 of us, waiting to see if someone would be reported missing. We sat through the weather and the sports, and some new segment that featured insanely difficult DIYs, before it finally cut to the night's breaking news. I've never seen him before, Roxanne said, as a reporter that I also hadn't seen before came up on the screen. I wasn't one to tune into the news regularly. I preferred to get my news online, so I didn't know much about who was and wasn't a regular reporter. He was an odd-looking man. I couldn't tell if he was 12 or 32. He had thick brown hair that was so perfectly combed back that it looked like a plastic Ken doll's hair. His eyes were a weird shade of gray and rather large, with no real visible eyelashes. His eyebrows were thick and very sharply angled, and his lips were deep red. He sat perfectly straight and spoke without moving anything but his mouth. In fact, I wasn't sure that he had blinked even once the entire time that he was on screen. Good evening. I'm Gary Lyer with today's breaking news. 15-year-old Jackson Toronto has been reported missing after vanishing from his home in the later afternoon. I knew Jackson. My dad coached the soccer team that he was on. And I knew his parents from high school, although not well. He's 5'10" with brown hair and eyes, and a small scar on his left cheek. The police urge anyone with information to call in and help find Jackson. Jackson has gone missing after the Sosas traded him in exchange for the safe return of their 3-month-old daughter, Ruby, who went missing a few days ago. so everyone can thank them for this unfortunate circumstance. Is he saying the Sosas are responsible for Jackson's disappearance? Zoe asked. I think so, but why? I replied. Thank you, Gary, for that update. If you were one of the 6 families affected in the last week, please make sure to fill out the cards that were mailed to you and mail them back as soon as possible so that we can provide you with the help that you need. A different woman was on screen now, as the news continued with regular updates. That was weird. Do you think this means that Jackson is going to go missing this week? I asked. I don't really know what to think, Roxanne replied. On Tuesday, right before the evening news began, I got a call from my mom. I have to tell you something, but you need to promise me that you will not tell anyone else about this. Not even Roxanne, she said, before I could even say hello. I'm not keeping secrets from Roxanne, Mom. Denise, please. No, I'm not keeping secrets from my wife. My mom huffed. All right, fine. You can tell Roxanne, but no one else. I was starting to get a headache, and I was only about 4 minutes into the call. So the Sosas got a really weird card in the mail. And so did the Smiths. Who are the Smiths? I asked. You know, the family that I told you about last week. Teresa's sister's brother and... Right, yeah, I remember that. I cut her off. Okay, so they got these really weird cards in the mail on Sunday, which is already strange because we don't get mail on Sundays. Right, I leaned against the kitchen counter as my mom rambled. So apparently, on the card, it said that if they wanted their kids back, then they needed to make a trade. What kind of trade? They needed to pick someone else's child to be taken, and they were promised that their child would be returned next Sunday. What? I was alert now. Yeah, isn't that insane? Wait, so then the news was right. Jackson is going to go missing because of the Sosas, I exclaimed. Yep. Linda Sosa and Charles Smith have some kind of feud, my mom said, sounding way too eager for someone who was talking about missing kids. So let me get this straight. The Sosas gave up someone else's child just to get theirs back? That's horrible. Mother's love. Wouldn't you give up another child for Zoe? She asked. No, I mean, no. I wouldn't make someone go through what I was going through. I don't want to be responsible for someone else's kid going missing. Whatever you say, Denise. I rolled my eyes. Okay, I have to go. Thanks for the update. I looked up to see Roxanne standing in the doorway. What was that about? Looks like whoever is taking these kids is offering the parents a trade. They get their kid back, as long as they give up someone else's. Her eyes widened. That's horrible. It's starting, Zoe called from the living room. Roxanne and I walked in and took a seat on the couch, on either side of Zoe. Good evening. I'm Gary Lyer, bringing you yet another missing person report. Gary Lyer looked exactly as he had last evening, only this time, he was wearing a white suit. 8-year-old Caroline West has been reported missing. She was last seen in her home and no one saw her leave. She has green eyes and red hair. Police urge anyone with information to call immediately. A faint screaming could be heard from the West's house across the street. Roxanne sighed. Poor parents, she whispered. I turned the TV off. The following evening, a 3-week-old was reported missing. I didn't know the family. I assumed it was someone on the other side of town or something. Gary from the news was starting to freak people out, and people were calling in, requesting him to be fired. I guess people thought that getting rid of Gary would solve the problem. The funny thing was, however, that no one ever seemed to remember seeing Gary anywhere besides the evening news. All of the other reporters could be seen in the grocery stores or the carnivals, sometimes church. All except for Gary Liar. I think even I was starting to blame him for the missing kids. There was a sad feeling in the air. It was like everyone was pretty much waiting for their turn. Waiting for their kid to be reported missing on the evening news. I couldn't stop thinking about Zoe and what I would do if she went missing. Maybe my mom was right. Maybe I would trade in someone else's kid for Zoe. I was laying down alone on the living room couch when my phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. Hello? Hey, Denise, it's Mom. Did you hear? I sighed. Hear about what? Ruby Sosa appeared in her crib this morning. I sat up. What? Really? Is she okay? Well, that's the weird thing. You see, they had to take her to the doctor because Ruby was sick or something, but it turns out that there's something else wrong now. If you ask me, I think it's karma. You can't just give up another life for your convenience. Mom, what was the problem with Ruby? I asked. She's rotting. She's what? She's rotting, my mom repeated. So, she's dead? I don't understand. Why would they return a dead child? No. She's not dead. She's alive. But her body is rotting, she corrected. What? Yeah. I saw pictures. It's gross, no offense. Poor kid's skin is gray and her fingernails are black. Her hair is falling out and her skin is starting to come off in chunks. I tried not to gag as I imagined what this might look like. I guess Charles wasn't too happy to find out that Linda traded his son's life, and he went over there with a rifle, just to give them a scare. He wasn't going to do anything, of course, but they called the police and had him arrested. Jesus, Mom, that's insane. He could have hurt someone. His partner wasn't too happy about that. Fought with them while the cops took him away. I leaned my head on the couch as I listened to my mom rant on about some other gossip. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, not able to get the images of a rotting 3-month-old out of my head. When the sun came up, I sat up, tired and feeling a headache coming on. I felt like I was on autopilot for the rest of the day. I did chores without even remembering how I had gotten them done. Made lunch and went about my regular routine. At one point, I was convinced that I was falling asleep while doing said chores. I took a nap and woke up when Roxanne and Zoe turned on the evening news. I opened my eyes to see Gary on the screen. Again, he looked the same except for his suit. Today, it was brown. His unblinking eyes were unsettling to look at. Good evening. I'm Gary Liar here with a breaking news update. I propped myself up on my elbows. 16-year-old Zoe Miller Brigham has been reported missing by her mothers. Zoe is 5'7" with curly black hair and brown eyes. She has a nose piercing as well as 2 piercings on each ear. We urge you to report any information that you may have to the local police. I felt like Gary was looking into my soul with his cold, dead eyes as I stared at him on the screen. Beside me, Zoe was weirdly silent. In fact, none of us had said a single thing. I turned around to look at Zoe and Roxanne on the couch. What are we going to do? Roxanne asked. Zoe simply stared at me. I shook my head and pinched my thigh, hoping that I was just dreaming. I don't know.